Hi, and welcome to the third trimester for us as expectant fathers. That pregnancy and that ultimate birth feels more present for us in this third trimester. What may have seemed or felt like an abstract idea now feels much more concrete. We're actively thinking and playing through the scenario of the birth of our child. And this makes a lot of practical sense. When we learn that something is happening 9 months in the future, it might just slip our mind, or we think, gosh, well, future Travis will have it figured out by then. But now we're 3 months, maybe less, from the birth of our child. So too, we start to experience an increased awareness of what we expect fatherhood will look like. But it's no longer those fanciful notions of, oh, I'm going to take my child to the park and we're going to play games. Instead, it's thinking really concretely about what is it like to be a father of a newborn? And we don't want to get rid of these aspirational hopes about fatherhood. We want to keep them, put them on the shelf, for now at least, because we're moving into a time where we're really just showing up physically, taking care of a lot of those physical needs early on. And so it can be helpful for us to revisit and reflect on those role models that we have for fatherhood. So those mentors or father figures, thinking about how they embody this and how they might inform us as we move into this space. Because we are moving into this space as fathers in a way that is different generationally and societally than we've experienced in the past. Today, we're not out at the bar having cigars and getting drunk with the boys while our spouse is there at the hospital giving birth. Instead, we're active and involved. So in many ways, we're forging new paths, as every generation does and as every person does on their own. Just like we did in the first 2 trimesters, we're going to keep learning about stuff, going to classes, workshops, talking about things, and maybe even doing a little reading. But this is not every day and all the time, so we want to make sure that we're pacing ourselves and moving through this in a way that we're able to digest it and really make sense of this information. And for a lot of expectant fathers, we start to think more concretely. We're developing plans, expectations about what is the birth process going to be like and what is that early parenting experience going to entail. And these plans that we're making with our partner can help us fantasize about those new routines or expectations, the different needs that we're going to have. And we want to be flexible with this. We want to recognize that the plans that we're making today might shift and evolve or change when our baby arrives. I appreciate that metaphor of data collection. We're going to go into this with a plan. We're going to test that plan, see how it goes, collect some data, and then alter that. It's a process of learning and adaptation. And this goes beyond the first, second, or third trimester. It's really a perspective that we take to fathering. To think that our children are constantly developing, the environment is always changing, and we need to respond to that. We need to look at what's working, what's not working, and adapt as needed. And not only is it kind of fun to be creative and see what's working and what's not working, but it also takes some of that pressure of being perfect off of our shoulders. We talked a little bit about nesting in the second trimester. We start thinking about it, we plan it out, we might be putting together a nursery. Those ideas start to become concrete realities in the third trimester. And part of making this real is coming in contact with reality, which is that it will not be perfect, that things will be left undone, and that's okay. And that can be a little disappointing. So it's important for us to communicate, collaborate with our partner. That sense of connection that we have with one another is more important than having everything completed. Because the most important place for our newborn to land is in a safe, caring relationship. As that due date gets closer, it becomes more important for us to understand what to expect in that birth process. It's tough to talk about and to think about, but there is the possibility that our child could come a little bit early. A premature birth in the third trimester has a pretty good prognosis, and so talk about this with your medical provider. And in these conversations, learn about and demystify things like the NICU, the Neonatal Intensive Care Unit. Newborns end up in the NICU all the time for a myriad of reasons, not just because they're premature. I know for a lot of fathers, including myself, we feel kind of blindsided when the NICU comes up. But it happens for a lot of kids. And it could be for a day, it could be for a week, it could be for a couple of months. But it's the support that our child needs at that point in time. In addition to the NICU, we want to talk about different birthing scenarios and how things might play out. A lot of parents-to-be will imagine that birth process as being a vaginal birth. And sometimes our vision of what this is going to look like is different than the reality. Sometimes that birthing process requires a little assistance, and that could be a surgical procedure or the use of medical instruments like forceps. Or in some cases, a cesarean or a C-section is required, which is when the baby is surgically removed. I encourage expectant fathers to keep that outcome in mind, the well-being of their partner and the well-being of their newborn. And the route to get there can be challenging, both for our partners and for ourselves. And so talking about these different types of births can help reduce that shock or impact when we need to shift and take a different approach. It's also important for us as fathers to be talking about the role that we want to play in that delivery process. I know I was surprised when I started learning about all the different ways that fathers are involved in the delivery. Fathers can be holding stuff, catching stuff, cutting stuff, all sorts of things. But what's most important is that we think about and reflect on what we feel comfortable with. If we feel comfortable providing that type of physical assistance, that's great. And if we don't, there is no shame in that. We're still in a position to provide emotional support for our partner and be a physical presence, to be there with them through this process. I want to make sure that I normalize that we each have our own unique boundaries around this. We're not skipping this. We're not down at the bar getting drunk. We are in the room, we are present, we are engaged, and we are supportive. It's in talking about things like this with our partner, about the different ways that our child may come into the world and the ways that we want to show up in that space. Talking about that and coming to an understanding where we can support one another meaningfully. That work we do to show up and support our partner expands into the third trimester. So again, being aware of and supportive of the fact that they are going through these physical and emotional shifts, increased discomfort, irritability, fatigue, and body image. And so providing that encouragement, that reassurance, that empathy, that reminder that this is a short period of time, that they're getting through it, and that they're doing a great job. And reminding ourselves that because of all these shifts, our partners are not going to be able to show up in the ways that they did before they were pregnant. So if in the past we've relied on our partner for things like emotional support or taking care of certain physical responsibilities around the house, we need to start to reevaluate that. And when it comes to some of those tasks or preparations that are going on around our home, we might just take those on. So we might talk through this with our partner, identify the different tasks or preparations that are underway, and we take that off their plate. This might not be equitable. It might not be how we've balanced our responsibilities in the home up to this point. But in the third trimester, that's out the window. And that can be tough for our partners and for ourselves, and understanding that for them, that sense of loss of control or frustration are perfectly normal during this phase of the pregnancy. And reminding them and reassuring them with our words and our actions that we are here to support them. The third trimester is also a time where stress and emotional dysregulation can increase. There's just a lot going on. We're working really hard, we're showing up for a lot of things, and we're carrying around these expectations. And that can be a bit of a mixed bag. On one hand, we're excited, we're anticipating the arrival of our child. And on the other, maybe we're feeling a little stressed out, a little fearful about what this might look like. We want to acknowledge that this is happening for both parents, that we both require a little extra support. And because we're both going through these challenges, we might need supports beyond our relationship. So reaching out to those within our social circle, friends, family members, people who we can rely on for additional support. There are also professional supports, talking to our physician, talking to the midwife, talking to the doula, talking to these people who have been through this, who might be able to answer some of our questions. I also encourage expectant fathers to reach out to a counselor if that additional level of support might be helpful, particularly as they're transitioning into parenthood. Better to have that relationship set up so that you can reach out than to need it and not have it available. So when we're in those challenging moments, we're able to reach out and say, hey, we're in the delivery room, or hey, I'm in the NICU and things didn't go the way we expected. Prior to that birth, being able to talk about fears and expectations, and afterwards being able to talk about that transition, some of those challenges that we're facing. Having seen both sides of that, both as a father reaching out to my counselor and as a counselor with fathers reaching out to me, I found it really helpful. Just as we did in the first 2 trimesters, we're continuing to reach out to other fathers to talk about what's going on during this time. It can be really helpful to get their perspective. And as we get closer to the due date, we might find that we're increasingly curious about what that birth experience was like, as well as those first several months as new fathers. These can be really helpful conversations to learn about what it was like for them as well as their partners. And while all this information can help inform us, we don't want it to overtake us. We want to acknowledge that they had their experiences and we are going to have our own. Because these common phrases of just you wait or you haven't experienced anything yet, that's a bunch of malarkey. It gets in the way of us being present for what is. Because we have been through things, we've been working through things all along. And rather than waiting for this next thing to emerge, let's be present with what is today. So again, being informed by their experiences, being supported by their presence and encouragement, but letting ourselves be who we are. And this last piece is probably one of the most important, is that we're taking care of ourselves. And we all know that we need to be doing this. We've known it our entire lives. We need to exercise and eat well and get enough sleep, all this good stuff. It's just that maybe we haven't done it yet. And so here in the third trimester, if we haven't prioritized our own self-care, if we haven't started to establish routines that maintain our well-being, now's the time to do that. And the key word here is sustainability, is that we want to create sustainable routines that we can take into fatherhood. For example, it's probably unrealistic for us to expect that we're going to go to the gym for several hours, multiple days a week. That's just not tenable. Instead, we want to think about how does this fit into our lives and balance with all of our other responsibilities. And so keeping it simple, thinking about those 5 basic areas of wellness. With physical wellness, thinking about exercise routines, sleep hygiene, easy, accessible recipes that nourish us. With emotional wellness, who are those outlets that we have that we can talk about what's going on for us? What are those mindfulness or relaxation strategies that we can do on the go? With intellectual wellness, how are we making our creative pursuits or our curiosities manageable so that we're able to access them at different times throughout the day? With social wellness, thinking about the friends, family, communities that we're a part of, and how can we make sure that there's time for that we can allocate space in our schedule to show up there. And finally, with that spiritual or existential wellness, just holding on to that larger perspective of all that we're doing, the enormity of this experience. Tending to these 5 areas is something that we all do in our own unique ways. It reflects what's important to us. We all know that we're supposed to do these things and that they're ultimately going to help us. And as we move into fatherhood, we have to move from knowing to actually doing. Because it's in the third trimester that we realize that our personal well-being is no longer personal. That how we are doing, the ways that we tend to ourselves, is going to impact how we're able to show up for our partner and for our kids. There are a lot of things that happen in the third trimester, and we're all going to go through it in our own unique way. My biggest point of encouragement for us as new fathers is that we move into this in the ways that we are capable of. That means we throw out some of these shoulds, some of these supposed tos, and we think about who we are and the legacy that we're a part of, that we connect with our partner, and that we communicate about what's going on, and that together we decide how we want to embody these values. All of this is big, busy, and exciting, and we've been training for it our whole lives. All of those skills and capacities that we've been exploring over the years, they all come to the foreground now. So we can take heart in that and the fact that we've faced challenges before. We've worked through difficulties in the past. So we've got this. Just be sure to take care of yourself, take care of your partner, take care of your newborn. I'll see you on the other side.